Venture Asheville podcast, where we talk about issues and topics in entrepreneurship. If you are looking for our podcast on that new Netflix film, Sea Beast, that's our rewatch podcast called Can You Believe the Ship They Put on TV Nowadays? If you haven't watched it, it's a good little film, quite excellent animation. Anyway, who are we? We are the Venture Asheville team. Venture Asheville is the high growth entrepreneurship initiative of the Economic Development Coalition for Asheville-Buncombe County. We build entrepreneurs and get startups funded. And fun piece of trivia, my daughter Madeline has been on 2 episodes. I thought that was 1. She's been on with Ginger Frank of Popcorn and with Dr. Ben Aiken from Lantern Health, of course. And today, as a treat, if you hear that squirming and giggling in the background, that is my 3-year-old son who is with me at home today, because that is the world we do business in. So if you hear that, please excuse Sawyer. He is working on becoming an entrepreneur, working on his pitch. I'll tell you, it's terrible. It's done in crayon, but if any investors want to meet him, happy to get you an intro. I'm Jeffrey Kaplan, this ship's captain, director of Venture Asheville, lover of a good wedding speech. We'll get to why that is in just a moment. With me, as always, is the wonderful, smart, talented, considerate, and creative Juliana Moon Walker, our master of interactive media. Yeah, so excited.
Whoa, manager speaking up there, Jay.
Yeah. Jay Walker, what is good with you?
Things are going well. I am recovering from a big wedding, as you kind of hinted there, this past weekend, and I'm feeling very thankful for air conditioning because it was 95 degrees during that wedding ceremony, and I was standing up there sweating. I didn't know if I was crying or sweating because I was just glistening.
I imagine you're glistening. That's what I picture. But tell us about the wedding speech. You were the maid of honor.
I was the maid of honor. It was a very stressful task to take on, but I did it. And I got so many compliments afterwards that I should have never been stressed to begin with. But it went really well, and I made a few people cry, which was the goal.
I'm proud of you. That's
it.
really great. I meant to tell you, I've
you.
given one wedding speech. It's my best friend Ryan at his wedding down in Florida in July. They just celebrated their anniversary. But he and I worked together. We actually went to high school together. We've been friends for a really long time. And he thought it'd be funny to prank me and not tell me that I was giving a speech. So it was during the cake. He called me up and said something like, "There's one more groomsman. I want to introduce everybody." And he wants to say a few words. Jeff Kaplan, come on up. And then as I'm walking up, he's like giggling. He's like, "I got you so bad. I got you so bad. This is the best prank ever." I'm like, "Ryan, this is your wedding. The prank is on you." Like, anyway, ended up knocking out the park, having a great speech, talking about the first time he met his wife and how impressed we all were with her. Anyway, enough about wedding speeches. You can hear there's a birthday party happening behind me. Our guest today is Jared Wheatley, man of many talents and entrepreneurial to the core. He has such a wonderful background in entrepreneurship and so many cool projects going on. I don't want to even try to get in front of it and do his intro. Instead, I'm going to ask Jared to introduce himself and say hello. So Jared Wheatley, who are you? And welcome to Talking Ship.
Shio, thanks for having me. Yeah, I am, like you said, a serial entrepreneur. I guess that's just because I'm a man with a diverse background and more energy than sense to settle into one good idea and build just that one thing. So I spin plates that includes real estate development, construction, and then less adjacent, a clothing brand, and what we talk about a lot now is a mural project that I'm working on.
So much to pick apart here. I want to go let's go way to the beginning. What inspired you to have this energy of, I want the autonomy to be independent and work for yourself as opposed to going after jobs? Because everything that comes out of you is like birthed from you.
Yeah, so basically I think it was my mom. Yeah, my mom is a person of abundant, endless energy. And when I was young, I remember being really into BMX. And I thought, like, man, I want to be a sponsored BMX rider or something in the BMX industry. And my mom, we'd take a car ride and she'd go, "How do you think you can get into the BMX industry?" And I would just kind of throw things at the wall and she'd be like, "Yeah, you can do that." So it would start by like making BMX videos about me and my friends riding. And so she bought me a nice computer, and she's like, teach yourself to edit videos. And so I had like the home camera and the computer, and I would sit down and literally edit videos way before it was cool. It was to the point where we would do it like 2 VCRs, trying to get different videos timed up together and sync in music. It was pretty rough. And then I would even try to design like bike frames on Microsoft Paint. And I would look up all the dimensions for the head tube and the top tube and the gusset plates and all of this. And so I think just having a really robust, supportive mom who thought everything I did was worth $1 million, I think that's probably where it came from. And
that's great. That support at home, that's unconditional, right? For your mom, it's unconditional support, and it's non-judgmental, right?
Yeah, and also when I failed, she was like, "Oh no, every time, that's great." Like failing was as good as winning, like to her, in her mind, in sports or any pursuits. If I failed, it was a great opportunity to learn and to like recognize why people didn't pay attention, or maybe my skills weren't in the right place to get the job done the way I needed to. And yeah, she wouldn't let me pout no matter what. It was always get back on the horse, get back on the bike, get back out into the wild and figure it out.
So she had this value already for the entrepreneurial journey before it was a thing.
That's right.
You're going to start, you're going to try, you're going to iterate, you're going to improve. You're never going to stop though.
That's it. And the other thing too is, we're not like a really educated household. So I'm the first college student in our house, and so try to encourage my kids to be entrepreneurs. My kids are 12 and 10, and they keep a business journal. And so when they come up with an idea, we write down the expenses, and we, look at the total profit and how much time it took, and we think through it in a deep and meaningful way from a business perspective. But coming from a house that was more about energy and creativity, it was somewhat less organized and somewhat dysfunctional, but provided a completely different type of exposure than maybe what like a business school would teach you.
But you do have some impressive degrees. If I'm remembering, maybe it was Northeastern.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, I found a way. I served in the Air Force, and that was kind of my
service. I had no idea.
Oh yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, when I went to graduate high school, I talked to my counselor, and they're like, "Wait, you're graduating, but do these credits stack up? What's this GPA like?" Yeah, basically they said like 100%, you're not going to college, young man. In fact, like you're barely getting out of this building. And so I took up an idea of joining the service to pursue the, getting an honorable discharge and getting my Montgomery GI Bill. I went and took the ASVAB, and they said, "You're going to be a meteorologist, young man." And I thought, I can barely even say that word, and what does that mean? But it was pretty good, because come the end of the day, what I didn't know at the time, and what took me many years to find out, was that a meteorologist and an economist, they use very similar calculations through multivariate regression to take into account the different parameters of a complex system. So all that being said, is I ended up getting my master's degree in economic development from Northeastern University in Boston. And I think Uncle Sam somehow knew I would be interested in that before anyone else.
I think that's awesome. And then when did you come to Asheville? And if I remember also right, part of the story is you had a pretty significant hand in the construction of New Belgium here. Is that right?
Yeah. So I guess in 2008, I was finishing up my enlistment in the Air Force, and I was serving in Anchorage, Alaska, which I grew up in Kansas City. So that's super flat, super boring geographically. And when I spent time in Anchorage, got used to the outdoor scene, but never got used to minus 40 degrees, Ugh. So when my enlistment was completed, I was dating the future mother of my children and future ex-wife. Unfortunately, this happened. But she said she always wanted to live in Asheville, North Carolina. And so in 2009, we made that happen. From there, 2 weeks after we moved here, oh my gosh, we found out we were pregnant with our first child. And as a, I would have been 22 then. As a 22-year-old young man, I said, I need to start building a life. So we bought a house. Luckily, I'd saved some money while we were in the service and had some savings and had a decent job in insurance, enough to where if you squinted really hard, I was credit worthy. And that was back when you could buy a house in Asheville for 160 grand. So we bought a little house, and I started school, went to AB Tech and then Western Carolina University, and got my degree in construction management. And it just so happened New Belgium was moving to town as I was completing my degree. And so I was really fortunate once again to take that ability of encouraging people to squint and look closely at a pitch I was giving them. And I pitched myself as a non-traditional student who was graduating with a lot of soft skills and intangibles. And I looped that into a project management position with Adolphson and Peterson Construction, who was the general contractor on the project. So ended up managing a $52 million project over 2 years as my first project out of college.
Yikes. So you have this thread, right, where you are putting yourself in the position to be successful. There's an element of, self-confidence there, and competency, and that $1 million smile that, would open up and trust you, right? But every time there's this, you have a knack, I think, for creating value from an underutilized or underleveraged resource, right? Like, you are clearly not a person who's shy to turn over every stone, look at every opportunity, and maybe there's some kind of calculus in your mind of, is this something I like? Is it where I want to spend my time? Is it rewarding? Like, what's your decision-making process? So let's talk about Épatage, right? Your fashion line, your clothing line, your apparel. Like, what was the calculus to say, I think you talk about when we and I met the changing workforce of who's doing construction.
That's right.
You saw opportunity and mismatch in traditional workwear, and how some of that, like Carhartt, became really like upstream or downstream in fashion, right? And less about the actual workwear. And you saw a gap in who was doing the work and what they were wearing. To me, this is like this amazing, like, multi 7, 8, 9, 10 part Venn diagram, and you're like, boop, found the opportunity right there. Yeah. Can you tell that story for us?
Absolutely. Well, and I appreciate that. And one thing I think, a lot of entrepreneurs, the skill you have to have is understanding the critical path. So you have to understand what steps that you're going to take along the way are mandatory and what are optional. And so when I got my degree, for instance, I got a 4-year degree in 2.5 years. And that was due to understanding prerequisites, understanding concurrent and non-concurrent activities, and honestly, understanding upside. So the upside to getting a degree in 2.5 years when you have 2 kids is massive, right? When you have no kids and you maybe live part-time at home, or you have a part scholarship, or your parents are taking care of your degree, there's not as great an upside to actually cutting short that educational experience. That's the same kind of thing when I looked at trying to become a project manager. I thought I could plow 80 hours a week into a project that's very remote or not. If I want to build a career, that was my opportunity. When I look at something like Épatage, you're talking about a tremendous workforce in the United States that's broadly overlooked. Being a construction worker is extraordinarily unsexy. It's dangerous. You don't need a high degree of education. It's super dirty. Like, every time you see someone, even myself included, I walk around dirty all the time. I'm a general contractor still. And look, I wear a t-shirt every day, dirty boots every day, holey jeans every day, dust in my hair, paint on my stuff, and I look at the way people respond to it. There's a certain number of people who respond to it with respect because they understand that I'm doing something that's really tangible. And there's a certain number of people who look at it and they disassociate. And so the complexity became, how do you turn a clothing brand into a statement about a lifestyle culture? And how do you turn a clothing brand into something where deeply urban, diverse cultures can attach to it in a way that says, I'm about hip hop or punk rock, or in our case, we use the term for outsiders by outsiders. And that term has a couple of different plays. It has the play as in we physically do work outside. So we are physically outside of buildings, we're physically in the cold, we're physically in the rain. But it also has the philosophical of being an outsider. Being an outsider is a very interesting study because it can only be self-assigned, right? Everyone has friends and family to some degree, right? Different orders of magnitude, but you choose to align yourself as an outsider. So when we set up the brand, we said we want to be deep urban. We want to be focused on aggressive alternative lifestyles. We're very popular among the LGBTQ. We're very popular among women. Our brand is actually, our clothing is shaped to be more unisex. And often when you think about, sorry, male construction workers, don't mean to put you down, I'm not attacking you. But yeah, you think about a butt crack, you think about a beer belly, you think about a very unattractive hair flying through the top of the collar of the shirt. You think about certain things, right? I'm a fourth or a third generation builder. Of course I know what the stereotype is, and the stereotype exists for a reason, right? But when I thought about differentiation, there's a massive differentiation when you take into account that a lot of working class people come through the streets. They know what it's like to be dirty even before they have to go into the workforce. They probably weren't pressing their t-shirt before going into high school. We're not talking about prep school students who had a uniform. We're talking about people who grew up in the inner city and know what the struggle's like to have to go down the street to do their laundry at coin-operated vendors. And so, yeah, I guess the short of the long would be identifying something that's very difficult. It's very hard to differentiate that market and go and be a part of it. But if you can, the upside is outrageous. The problem is, to get to the upside, there's a big slide. So do you have the ability to make that climb before you start sliding the other direction? That's where self-confidence, risk-taking ability, appetite for risk is, that's like the gold dust of being an entrepreneur, really.
Every time I see somebody in Épatage apparel or I see the van around town, I want to chase them down and be like, I know Jared, but I realize this is a brand, right? And there's, people may not know you personally who are wearing it, obviously, right? It's like, it lives on its own. It's a whole venture. But what about the loyalty of your wearers or your customers?
Yeah, our entire business is really anchored around, our street teams in New York and Los Angeles, a small team in Chicago, small team actually in Sacramento. These folks are extraordinarily passionate, and I've taken the time to visit those teams for the most part in person. And I kind of say, like, there's a street team leader, so there will be 1 to 3 of those people that I meet annually, and that's a big part of it, is them truly knowing me on a personal level and understanding. Like, for instance, in New York, a lot of our crew is focused around Local 46, which is a rod busting union, which you may not even know what rod busting is, but it's the formed reinforcing bar. It's the steel that goes inside of concrete. And so when I meet with these people, not only do I generally look a way that they accept, but I also use a vocabulary and a nomenclature, a technical vocabulary that is very intimate and focused on their life. So I can become a leader, not just from an aesthetic perspective. Oh, he's heavily tattooed. Okay, maybe he's cool, right? But like, really, I understand what they do on a daily basis, and I understand the technical and physical competency and risks they take, and also why they talk trash on their management and supply chain issues, and what it's like to, have to go to the bathroom in a plastic box in the middle of the winter,
Right.
So that's the biggest part of it, is building the loyalty around culture. You can't fake what I have experienced in life. And that really deep, diverse experience I have gives me the broad ability to be able to speak with billionaire, private equity, real estate investors, as well as, minimum wage earning workforce. And so I think when an entrepreneur goes to get into a business, it's very important that they have the technical competency as well as the creativity to understand how they're going to penetrate that environment. Because with just the technical competency, you're probably going to have a hard time differentiating. And if you're overly creative, you probably can do the same squint game, but you can get yourself into parts of culture and parts of very technical career fields that really are not applicable. You could think about something like WeWork, right? Somebody who had the great ability to sell an idea and a concept, and they took it from essentially real estate and a leasing business model and tried to morph it into the sales pitch of a technology company without necessarily understanding all the technical nuances that were required to be a truly tech company and smart tech. I mean, that's very difficult. So for me, I think about it. Sometimes people ask me, who's your biggest competition in workwear? And the answer is no one. Like, there's not even close. I mean, I know a number of small workwear brands like Building America's USA. They sell a lot of t-shirts, but they're primarily a t-shirt company. They think about what graphic is going to sell to these guys. I'm talking about an iterative clothing company that truly focuses on the culture as well as the technical aspects and also the cost components. There are like outdoor brands that are sliding towards the workwear market, but $100 pair of pants rips the same on a job site as a $25 pair of denim, and somebody who's working class, I understand that. When I see a manager, a project manager or construction manager wearing a certain brand, I know immediately that person has not and will not work in the field any given day of the week. And having that insight and connection to really our culture, because it's a culture that's deeply embedded inside of construction, and it's my job as the entrepreneur to crack in there and expose these folks to the like-mindedness.
Yeah, two thoughts come to mind. The first is that who your competition is. Remember, Netflix, which has had a terrible quarter, at one point said their competition is sleep. And the other about WeWork, we should mess a whole other conversation, but their most valuable asset is land, which is valuable by the nature of its scarcity. And so they're trying to scale something that does not scale, which is scarce land and real estate. So always felt there was some kind of disconnect. The other shoe was always going to drop. At the beginning of our podcast, I said hello. You said, I want to get the word right. Shoya?
Oh, you're saying when I said hello, right?
Yes.
Shio.
I'm sorry.
Shio is hello in Cherokee. And actually, even to be more specific, that's the Eastern Band of Cherokee dialect, Shio. In Oklahoma, we say OCO. It sounds almost completely different. So, you will see it SIYO in the East. That's Shio. And then in Oklahoma, you see it OSIYO, OCO. And
so that's what I want to talk about next. You've gotten a lot of
sure.
press lately about this project. And I even see the letters, the characters on your hand. I hope that's one of your newest tattoos.
Yeah, that's right.
So
that's right.
So Shio, hello. Can we talk about your background connection to the Cherokee and other Native tribes in America and your latest project, the Indigenous Walls Project?
Absolutely. So the Indigenous Walls Project is an intertribal. It's similar to the Workwear brand in the sense that it's very community centric. It's also a very, very small subset of our entire society. So Native peoples make up about 1% of our population in the United States. And I'm going to try not to get emotional. I probably won't because we're distant and working remotely and all of that, and that helps. But yeah, my 3 times great grandmother was relocated from, Appalachia to Oklahoma with her children via the Trail of Tears. Okay. And that's Indian country. That's before the United States had set up Oklahoma or any of that. We're separate sovereign nation from the United States, and we have treaty rights that identify that. There are over 572 nations in our country. So when somebody says Cherokee, often somebody thinks about one group of people, but there are 3 federally recognized Cherokee nations: the United Gadua Band, the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, and the Cherokee Nation. And inside of all of those, we're sovereign and we set our own laws. And that's important. I say that because that's a deep and meaningful part of Native culture, is to recognize that and honor that. So I'm an urban Indian. I grew up off reservation. My grandpa served in the Army as well. And after his service, this was the period of time in the federal government known as the termination period. And they federally mandated to terminate as many tribes as possible. This is in the 1950s. You can look it up. It's stated clearly, right? It was an actual federal policy. And so we have 572 now. We used to have 672. They terminated more than 100 nations' rights, sovereign rights, treaty rights with our country. And some of that was very coerced and very forced. And they took back more than 1 million acres of land at that time. So sometimes people think like, land back, oh, why are you worried about land back, Jared? That was some distant time ago. Some distant time is different for Native people than it is for anyone else, because in Appalachia, around Asheville, the Qualla boundary, right? Gadua Mound, that's our motherland. They have us documented there for over 11,000 years. So when you think about the United States being overlaid over us for a couple hundred years, it's sometimes difficult to stomach when you know your own history. So what we've got is the Indigenous Walls Project, which is a very positive form of activism, where we have about 25,000 square feet of walls donated to Native and Indigenous artists to create murals around our culture. We focus heavily on language and medicine and food to kind of reel the public in to a conversation about what it means to be Native in the United States right now. And that was pretty long-winded, so I want to give you space for any questions.
No, I so appreciate the background understanding and personal history some more, and it adds almost more weight to an already significant project. I know I've seen at least one wall in the South Slope, maybe on the refinery. Is that right? How's that looking down Cox Ave? I know I've seen one of your walls.
That's right. So
tell us where your walls and what do they say?
Okay, so the project started super simple. My business partner, David Moritz, is a private equity real estate developer in Asheville. And we were talking about community, what it means to build community. And I said, it's like, I could come up with a community project right now. And he kind of laughed. He's like, oh, Jared, you're always like this, right? And so we came up with a couple of concepts. And one of them was kind of a baby version of the Indigenous Walls Project, where I said we could paint things that are actually the Cherokee syllabary. And he goes, okay, do it. And of course, 2 weeks goes by and he's like, why haven't you painted the syllabary yet? And I was like, well, I'm not going to. I'm going to find an artist to do it. I'm not an artist. And then he's like, well, you're an artist, Jared. You're good enough. I was like, okay. And he kind of just challenged me. So I went out on the first wall and I put up Cherokee Nation in the syllabary, right?
Gotcha.
And immediately people really attached to it. And this is right on Cox Ave at Sawyer. So if you were going into Rabbit and then you look back across Cox Ave, this is a black wall with in the syllabary Cherokee Nation written really big. As soon as he saw the response, he goes, get out of here. Like, we got to do more. He's like, you're making the impact you said you could. Now prove it. You know, it's like, you're going to win horse and you make the shot.
Yeah, keep
So
going,
then you have
do
to
another
make the
one.
shot
Yeah.
to prove the shot.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, you know, I mean, look, he's a real estate developer. Of course he's like that. He's a deal guy. He thinks everything needs to just happen over and over again. So that's where we went down to the refinery. And on the north side of the building, we painted a vertical Cherokee Nation. On the adjacent building, it's Open Hearts, or I think it's called Open Hearts is in there. It's a nonprofit that does artwork with an underserved community. And so on the south side of that building, once again, a real big Cherokee Nation, 40 feet up in the air, you know, and this is like, people were like, whoa. And that's what I found out is I tell people like the grass was just so dry. Like people had no idea necessarily that it was Cherokee land. They kind of had the concept. They knew it was native. But maybe the best indicator I had that the grass was so dry and it was going to catch fire was that when I was painting the first mural, I wasn't even 30 minutes into it. I had kind of just sketched some letters on the wall and started painting. And this family comes by and there's like a 4-year-old kid and he looks up and he goes, what's he painting? And his mom looks at me and she's like, what are you painting? And I'm like, oh, I'm painting the words Cherokee Nation, but in the Cherokee syllabary. And before I could say anything, she looks at her son and she goes, he's writing Cherokee in their language. These people were here before any of us were here. And I was like, dang, like, and it happens. Like I was out there meditating on the wall the other day, and we all have our stereotypes we have to get over. We have our prejudice. I do, everyone does. And I hear this big country voice. He's like, son, you see that? Look over there. And it was out by the wall. I turn around and like huge lumberjack, real hillbilly dude. And I say this with love in my heart, coming from the Midwest, right? And his son's walking across the crosswalk right with him. He's like, there's Cherokee, and we got to respect them. They've been here since forever.
Look at that.
And I was like, I mean, honestly, I started getting pretty emotional right then, you know, because that's the whole purpose. The whole purpose is small incremental awareness, you know, and people have this already in their heart. So we're just encouraging that. And right now we've had Apache from Albuquerque, Monoman from St. Paul. We've had Mexica artists who live local, a Quechuan artist who lives local, myself, my mom, my oldest, who's 12, and my 10-year-old and I all painted a mural that my mom and my oldest designed together as a collaboration. So whoops, lost my camera there for a minute, but 3 generations all on one mural.
It's awesome.
I mean, it's a lifetime event for us personally, you know.
I mean, think about the validity that the message is sticky, right? That's like every marketer's challenge. Like you cook something up, maybe you focus group it, maybe if focus groups are rife with problems, you put it out in the world, you're like, ooh, I hope this works. Hope people get what we're trying to say, right? And how quickly your message is connecting. It's authentic, it's beautiful, it's stunning. It stops you when you're walking around. It catches your eye across all the signs you have in town. You notice it, you see it right away. I really want to commend you on that project. And you know, when I grew up in South Florida, you know, like not like on the beach per se, but like much more in the Everglades. Like our house where it ended, like that neighborhood ended, was the Everglades, and you go down 10 minutes, and it was Seminole Reservation, Big Cypress. And like I went to school with the Chiefs kids. We would do airboat rides, and, you know, and watch like alligator wrestling. Like we really grew up in it. But I didn't realize until moving here, right? Like we had Osceola, Tequesta, Calusa, Seminole words for our land and our spaces everywhere, right? Our towns, streets, the lake, Lake Okeechobee, right? Like it's like the language is so a part of South Florida's culture, whether we know it or not. And I didn't realize that until moving here. You know, with the forced removal of our native folks, our native tribes, that so much of our culture, it's all been renamed. It's all
That's
like,
right.
it was just like wiped clean,
Yeah,
and started over, right? And so I believe you spoke at the recent county commissioners meeting about there's a campaign to rename Clingman's Dome to the original Cherokee name of Kuwohi.
Yeah, that's right.
That right. And
Yeah,
if you
you're
could tell
doing
us a little
great.
more, if you could tell us a little more about that campaign and what it would mean to us locally and the Eastern Band of Cherokee who's spearheading this thing, and what we can do to help if any of our listeners are so moved.
For sure, yeah. So, like you said, Kuwohi. Kuwohi is a beautiful word. It means mulberry place. It was sacred land to us. We have creator stories that involve Kuwohi. And then also, it was a vital part of actually keeping the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians in Western North Carolina. That mountain is difficult enough, and people don't want to go up it enough and deal with it enough that our folks hid in those hills and refused to leave. So when you think about nations, you track population. The population of the Cherokee Nation is 420,000 enrolled members. The population of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians is 16,000. So that shows you the disparity. Kuwohi was vital in our survival in this region. Without Kuwohi, we may not even be speaking about the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. It's tough to know, you change one variable, everything changes. And the other thing we talked about here is marketing, right? And it's maybe not the sexiest way for me to approach it as a native, but it is true. Kuwohi is a deep and meaningful name that we've had for 11,000 years, and it has a story attached to it that I think people from around the country can appreciate. I can't speak to Clingman's Dome from a marketing perspective, but it appears to me the story is significantly less interesting. And I don't know if that's just my personal attachment, but when I hear Kuwohi, it's exotic, it's interesting. I want to go see what it's about. And when I hear the story, that's a reason to come to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. I mean, it's the most visited park in the country anyway, so it's not like they need more incentive, but it is beautiful and it's storied. And so what we have is we have kuwohi.org is set up as our website. And then we have change.org that I'm sure you guys may be willing to link to, that has a petition that anyone can go there and sign and just kind of show support for the name. It is deep and meaningful to our people because it's funny, a lot of the time people don't even know we're here. I heard some crazy statistics, 70 to 80% of the United States doesn't even know that Native people still exist, and just how difficult life can be, inside of deep urban environments. Look, if you can barely afford rent, if you're paying 60% of your income to rent, I can forgive you for not knowing as much as I would like of America's history, of Native history. But small little cues like this, which cost society nothing, it's really going to cost the National Park Service very little. And as far as us in Buncombe County or Swain County or, Knox County over in Knoxville, supporting the effort, it's really just a nice handshake to a community that's been so overlooked as it is.
I think it's an incredible project, and we saw it in the West. I think Denali became the official name of the mountain. That was Mount McKinley, maybe.
I don't think it was Mount McKinley, but we did get a mountain changed in Yellowstone National Park to I believe it's First Peoples or First Nations, and that's important. I mean, to be recognized when you're only 1% of the population, 1%, we are essentially just mythical creatures that Hollywood once in a while throws into people's consciousness. It's hard for people to imagine that, the artist who did An Elder Looking Out Over the Cosmos on our walls, right? He's a hardcore graffiti writer from Oakland, California, but he's Apache. To be an enrolled Apache, you have to be 76.5% Apache, okay? Now, I'll tell you right now, blood quantum is genocide, right? But if your nation instills that in their laws, that's the law, whether it's perceived or not, right? So 76.5, you think about that.
Right, it's more than 3 grandparents, right?
Exactly. It's literally, it's a very intentional number. It's a little scary when you think about 76.5 versus 75.
Right.
His blood has been almost not diluted at all. In fact, I think he's full blood Apache. Think about that. The person you meet today is almost the exact same person that would have been on that land during first contact. I love him to death. Ryan, wherever you're at, I love you.
That's amazing. Yeah.
And to think about him being in the streets of Oakland, making his name as a graffiti writer, that's a very difficult environment for, once again, sorry, Ryan, but a relatively small Indigenous person in a deep urban environment to cut their teeth. And that's an image that, we're bringing in a conversation that actually gets wrapped up in to Kuwohi as well. When you bring Kuwohi into the future, you actually bring all our people into the future as well. And you start to see us in a very urban, modern way of living, which I think that's important for us in our survival.
Mm-hmm. I really want to thank you for sharing that perspective with us. There's been a lot of press about the campaign to rename Clingman Stone to Kuwohi, but I don't think the significance to the Cherokee nations throughout time, even being as part of the creation stories, the place of refuge, of security through genocide attempts, that's a pretty important part of the story to know. So I want to thank you for sharing that with us. We're about to be at the end of our time, and as per tradition on this podcast, we let Juliana Walker, aka Jay Walker, aka Moonwalker, aka Maid of Honor, give their final question. Jay Walker, what do you got for Jared?
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it short and just have you. Well, first, I just want to thank you for your hard work, and I appreciate your approach to your entrepreneurial tactics. But I just want to talk about the Indigenous Walls Project again, and just get the word out about where people can find you, and if somebody has a wall, or if they want to go out and find all of these murals, where can they go?
All right. Well, our best and most prominent presence is on Instagram at Indigenous Walls Project. And then we have indigenouswallsproject.com. So you can find us either one of those places. On our website, you can either donate walls or you can request to be an artist. So those two options people use. I love it. Also, I'm a terribly public guy. Anyone can reach out to me directly. My handle is jared.épatage. People DM me directly.
You could say you're very accessible, but I'm fairly open. I'm very accessible. Try that one.
Yeah. Whoops. I'm not the most socially competent, but I am accessible.
That's great.
Wonderful. And is this just a hyper local project, or is this hopefully, one day maybe a national?
Oh, well, thank you, because now you automatically bootlegged me into the most important statement, which this is a land back movement. Okay. I'm actually currently already working on a land back deal that'll bring land back into trust for Native tribes. That's the biggest part of the movement, is to make sure that people really understand that murals are beautiful. We love creating art. In the end, it's about reclaiming not just wall space, but land. And it's not just Asheville. So right now I'm in Atlanta, and I'm negotiating with the Atlanta Beltline to curate. We'll see, but it looks like a pretty significant amount of walls down here, because the whole northwest side of Atlanta was the land of the Onondaga, which is the Cherokee people. So Atlanta, Chicago, Oakland, all are in conversations. Actually, Kansas City, the Kansas City Indian Center is very interested in us doing murals on their building. And so we say anywhere where there's space for Native or Indigenous representation, especially a lot of communities, like people think about Pueblo or, Albuquerque, where there is a lot of Native engagement. Most of the country is not like that. And so our thought is, and look, also as a people, we're very protective of our culture, so we can be difficult to find. We can be hard to get a hold of. I'm trying to function as a conduit to allow people a level of comfort to come to the city and make these paintings.
Yeah, absolutely. That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the time, you two. You've been great.
I've got a vision of, a new exhibit, Smithsonian's. They have a Native American museum. It's got to be some modern And it starts off me walking all the different kinds of canoes and kayaks. And I think it should end with what's happening today. And maybe a traveling exhibit of Indigenous Walls Project. I'll call who I know over there, which is nobody. I'll see what I can do. And
Well, I'll
know
hold you to
somebody in
contacting
Smithsonian, right?
nobody.
Yeah. Let's see what we can do. I'm gonna go on LinkedIn, snoop around,
There you go.
try to find some Smithsonian employees to plug you. Jared, man, such an honor to hear about the stories, and if we can help in any way, we're gonna do everything we can to share your message. We love what you're doing. We're so excited and glad to just have you in our community doing this work. And I believe, like Jay Walker, this is gonna be so much bigger than Asheville, and I'm so glad you're starting it here. In the home of the Eastern Band Cherokee, and many Cherokee kids came from the Appalachian region. So thank you for starting it here, and we're excited to help you grow. Thanks for talking ship with us.
Thanks for having me.